So this is an introduction to air masses and fronts. A lot of this information can be found on page 13 of your reference table. So what is an air mass? An air mass is just simply a bubble of air that has similar temperature and humidity or moisture. And these characteristics are taken on by where this air is born, so to speak, or where it comes from. And where it comes from is called the source region. So there's a few different source regions. On page 13 of your Earth Science reference table, you can find all the symbols for the different source regions. So if a air mass forms over land, it's considered to be a continental air mass. And since it forms over land, the air will tend to be dry. If it forms over water, it's called maritime. And obviously, if it forms over water, then it's going to be more moist. We also have a couple different places where it can form as far as whether it will be cold or warm. So a polar or Arctic air mass will form at higher latitudes, and this will be colder air. And tropical will form at lower latitudes, and this will be warm. So when we combine the letters of these different source regions, we can have some really nice terms to describe what an air will be like. Here's a nice kind of representation of source regions and air masses from those source regions. You can see that the small m and the capital P for maritime polar is up in the northwestern part of this map. And this is going to be a cold, wet air mass. If you move over to central Canada, you see a CP for continental polar. This is going to be a cold, dry air mass. And if you move down to the bottom of the map, in the southern region here, you see a CT for continental tropical. This is an air mass that forms at lower latitudes over land. This is going to be a warm, dry air mass. And if you look over to the east off the coast of the United States, you see an MT, maritime tropical, which will be a warm, moist air mass. So when these air masses come together, they're called fronts. The term front is actually a military term. When two armies collide, where they meet is called the front, and that is exactly what is when two air masses form. Where the two air masses meet, they will be called a front. So it's that boundary between two opposing air masses. Cold fronts are when cold air moves against warm air, and this is going to result in some really short, heavy precipitation. Cloud formation is vertical, so it's going to go up in the atmosphere, the cloud formation will. And most of this precipitation happens behind the cold front. And you can see the map symbol down there, which is also found in your reference table. A warm front is warm air moving against cold air. This is going to usually result in lighter precipitation. Cloud formation is going to be horizontal. So it's going to be kind of like parallel to the surface of the Earth. And most precipitation happens in front of the warm front. And you can see the map symbol below. An occluded front is a little bit more complicated. This is a type of front where cold air overtakes, or a cold front rather, overtakes a warm front. And these fronts are going to usually swirl around an area of low pressure. And you can see the map symbol there. And just to kind of show you what an occluded front looks like from a side or a profile view, you have some really cold air coming in, and it's overtaking a warm front, and it's kind of pushing against some cooler air on the right hand side here. And what it's doing is it's forcing the warm air up. It's squeezing that warm air up between the two fronts, and you have this kind of cloud formation between the two. And then that takes us to a stationary front. A stationary front is kind of like where two air masses stall out. You have cold air moving one way and warm air moving the opposite way, and they meet, but neither one of them is really strong enough to overtake the other, and it just kind of sits there for a little while deciding what it wants to do. So this is a brief introduction into air masses and fronts. There will be a animation with this in the assignment on Classroom, and you can use that to kind of work through your lab.